right, Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Yes, we got a lot to talk about. So one thing you learn fast when you cover global stories and spend time on the ground in different countries, hosting a World Cup is transformative. I was just in Qatar last week, and you could see how that tournament reshaped their entire tourism economy. Infrastructure upgrades, packed hotels, new jobs, a level of national pride that spilled into almost every conversation. The World Cup isn't just a game, it's an economic engine and an international spotlight. So with the U.S. finally stepping into that spotlight next year, what you'd expect right now is unity, coordination, a moment to show the world we can pull something big off without the usual chaos. And then President Trump stepped into the Oval Office. Standing next to the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, the president started floating the idea of actually pulling World Cup matches from certain U.S. cities. Not based on logistics, not based on FIFA decisions, but based on whether Democratic mayors and governors would, quote, behave. Those are his words, not mine. In that Oval Office moment, he said, quote, the governors are going to have to behave. The mayors are going to have to behave. Then he pivoted to California and started musing about sending in the National Guard to Los Angeles to give that city some, quote, extra help. Now, this wasn't subtle. It was a warning shot, and it was the first one. I mean, it wasn't the first one. Trump has already threatened Boston for its Democratic mayor, Michelle Wu. Now, Los Angeles and Seattle are on the list, cities that have been planning, spending, and preparing for years. Cities FIFA already vetted. And then he went even further.
If we think there's going to be a sign of any trouble, I would ask Johnny to move that to a different city. We have a lot of cities that would love to have it, number one, and we'll do it very safely. So if we think there's a problem in Seattle where you have a very, very liberal/communist mayor, I would say, certainly beyond just liberal. I watched her over the weekend. Wow, that's another beauty we got there. But if we think there's going to be a problem, Johnny, can I say we will move? I don't think you're going to have this problem, but we're going to move the event to someplace where it's going to be appreciated and safe.
Seattle, the city Infantino himself toured and called a, quote, cut above the rest, suddenly being cast as a security risk. That's a pretty wild pivot, especially for an event already awarded in 2022, with 11 U.S. cities spending years on infrastructure, security, coordination, and preparation. It's hard to overstate how unprecedented this would be, moving World Cup games months before kickoff. That's not just rare, it's unheard of. This isn't swapping a conference room. These host cities have budgets, partners, hotels, transit systems, and millions of visitors already locked in motion. But all that is now colliding with Trump's broader tactic, sending the National Guard, ICE, CBP, and other federal forces into Democratic-run cities to crack down on immigration and crime. We've watched these deployments raise alarms from community leaders and civil rights groups. And we've seen reports of U.S. citizens getting swept up in the dragnet. Just this weekend, Charlotte got a taste of that, quote, help. Trump says his preference is simply that Democratic mayors invite the National Guard in right now. No pushback, no debate, and if not, well, their World Cup games might be on the line. Look, I'm all for keeping people safe, but using the world's biggest sporting stage as leverage over America's own cities, that's not security policies, that is political theater. And the World Cup deserves better than a power play. It deserves unity that it was designed to bring.
What sport is this? Is this soccer?
This is soccer. This is the most popular sport in the world. And so to not know about it, kind of shows the ego of the American that doesn't understand that the most popular sport worldwide is not, it's football, which we don't call it, but soccer.
We have actual football, which is...
Yeah, but it brings out millions of people that travel.
Sure.
We're going to bring our economy boosted in all these cities that planned for years. And so even if you specifically, Robbie, don't care about it, the rest of the world is traveling to the U.S. to inflate our economy and bring it up.
From cities, particularly in East and Southeast Asia, maybe in the Middle East, you just come back from Qatar, that are orderly, where there's no crime.
No, they come from Europe also.
Right, there it's criminal and dirty, we know. But in other places, it's clean and it's safe. And they're going to come to our cities and find, oh wow, America is not doing as well as I thought. Maybe that is what the administration is trying to guard against, giving us projecting weakness because of the crime and dysfunction and disorder in some of these cities like Europe. We don't want that, and so Trump is expressing that concern.
Yes.
We shouldn't move. You're right. We shouldn't suddenly yank from Seattle or wherever else
Los
the
Angeles,
ability to
Boston,
host a soccer game. I don't see why the federal government has anything to do with coordinating this. I also think, frankly, the benefits of hosting large sporting events in terms of like economic development, et cetera, is always overstated. I find it just gross how much government money is spent on building new stadiums for private teams, if we're talking about just domestic sports. Yes, you get an economic boost, but think about all the money you spent to build the infrastructure in the first place, right? And so it's not so much a net increase necessarily as just shifting resources from one group, from the tax base of the area to some other, to the vendors and merchants and those things. So I'm skeptical of that as well. But I think that's the administration's fear, that we would look like our cities are dysfunctional.
Well, I think that he should have conversation, like I said, about the National Guard in the beginning, and not first threaten publicly and then get mad when a mayor or a governor says, oh, no, we're not interested in that route. Let's discuss about long-term ideas like community policing, or trying to figure out what a long-term solution looks like. But since he skipped those steps, it already caused tension, like coming at the Democratic mayor of Boston. And obviously he has a beef with Newsom. They're back and forth, who is overseeing California. And just picking out certain cities, why doesn't he try to figure out how to work alongside these people to make it the best World Cup ever? He's threatening. How does it look, though?
More policing. It means more. It
means finding people that are close to the community to police the community, as opposed to the National Guard, who is completely outside of the community, just coming in with military uniforms and standing there like we have in DC.
Well, if I can get the Democrats to admit that we need more policing, then yeah, okay, we can talk. That's an idea they found very, very baffling.
There's a long list of things that we can do, but I also think that when you're looking at the world that's watching us, and America gets out of its own ego and understands that the rest of the world will come here to support and continuously support the World Cup because they care about soccer more than Robbie does, that even after the games are over, people will still come, as I saw happening in Qatar, to see the stadiums or to see all of the different monuments that end up, like, government pays for, to be there to commemorate the fact that a World Cup was hosted there. And so this is not all to go to waste. This is something that brings national pride and brings attention to certain cities that maybe people weren't going to travel to. People might come and go to New York all the time. That's like the #1 international tourist destination, right? But people might not come all the time and go to Seattle or Boston. And so now these are places that people who are outside of our country are going to stop, spend money, and continue to patronize businesses there. And so somehow that's a bad thing, because President Trump thinks our crime is so out of control that we won't be able to host these people in 6 months. And I just don't believe he thinks that. I think he's just throwing out idle threats because he's not getting what he wants. And so this is how a baby throws a tantrum.
I think we're very much at cross purposes here. I would rather have the cities be made nicer and cleaner and more safe, and spend money there on things that are legitimate functions of government, which is providing for public safety and maintaining the public parks and those things. Those are the legitimate functions of government. Making nicer sports stadiums and building sports monuments or whatever is not at all a function of government and should not be done. So if we're going to spend government money, spend it on making the cities nice.
So the president should have said no thank you to the Biden should have said no thank you to the World Cup when they awarded it to the U.S. and then gave it to cities. That's what you're saying, because he's in.
I would need to know more about exactly who pays for what in terms of getting the city ready. If it's voluntarily being done, if it's being done via democratic means, or if it's being done by private forces, then fine. If it's the federal government and the taxpayers' responsibility, then yeah, I very well would have said no thank you.
And now the cities have been preparing for this since 2022. You think it's appropriate now, 6 months out, for the president to say we might just switch gears? That's a good strategy?
No.
Exactly. So what are we doing? We're just embarrassing the U.S.
I'm just giving you the Trump administration's point. We don't want to be embarrassed when they show up, and it's a mess. That's my view. Up next, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez disappointed some on the left when she downplayed the idea of a primary challenge against House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Stay with us.